Welcome to a Hunter Nation virtual campfire with Judge Brad Schimel, and of course, none other than my best friend, Ted Nugent. But Ted, we got to do a little housekeeping right off the bat because you know how this works with you and I. We invite people all the time to join us, but I can't figure it out. Sometimes some of them don't join us. So we send an invitation out to Judge Brad Schimel, who's running for the Supreme Court in the great state of Wisconsin. And we also sent an invitation out to Judge Susan Crawford. And I notice, as we said here, that only one of the two of them have joined us. And I must tell you, Ted, we let both candidates know that Hunter Nations stands for God, family, country, the Constitution, the Second Amendment, and our hunting lifestyle. And what does it mean to you, Mr. Nugent, that only one of the candidates wanted to talk about those topics?
Well, number one, those who join us obviously celebrate truth, logic, and common sense. So, Brad, welcome to the Ted Nugent Truth, Logic, Common Sense Campfire. And as Keith, as you know, I'm just a guitar player, but 76 years clean and sober. I'd like to think that, except for the black robe, I'm a judge. I make judgments on behalf of my family based on extreme and radical concepts. In fact, they're so extreme and radical that I dare to experiment in self-government. I actually think that God gave me individual rights, and the founding fathers, by divine intervention, actually wrote them down in case somebody wanted to play king or tyrant or emperor in the future. So number one, Brad, welcome to the campfire. We appreciate your courage and you pursuing a position of authority in your community. And again, I love Wisconsin. I've been hunting, playing rock and roll, and fighting for the radical extreme constitutional conservatism and conservation in the great hunting, fishing, trapping, freedom state of Wisconsin. So Keith and I are here to celebrate the fact that America is on a true north compass setting once again. And I understand that you're a fan of the Ultimate Freedom soundtrack, my music, which means that you deserve to be here.
I cruised around in my 1974 F-350 with Ted Nugent cranking out. And you probably remember me. I was pumping my fist when you were in Hartford, Wisconsin, and East Troy, Wisconsin, and Waukesha, Wisconsin. Oh, I was right there. You saw me out there, I'm sure.
Well, before we get into the constitutional considerations, let's wax poetic on the ultimate soul music, rhythm blues soundtrack of Uncle Ted. Is my music exhilarated and stimulating, or what? Do I have the best band in the world? Doesn't it make the girls dance a little bit more, almost like a pre-rut kind of soundtrack? Don't you think, Brad?
The Motor City Madman. And
as much fun as you have with my music, you are incapable with all your powers from God. You just can't have as much fun with my music as I do. You can tell when I'm on stage, my feet don't touch the ground, but that's relative to why you're here with Hunter Nation, because we're a group of families that believe in God, family, country, Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Ten Commandments, the Golden Rule, work ethic, law and order, good over evil, self-defense, a true north compass setting. So thank you for showing up. And I think it's a huge and powerful indicator, Brad, that you stand with those traditional values that Keith and I have been fighting for a long time, because we saw them being chipped away over the years. So thank you for that. And we hope that you do ascend to a position of making judgment calls based on the families that Keith and I share campfires with, hunting, fishing, trapping, outdoors, the shooting range, barbecues, and killer music.
I'm right with you, and those neon lights behind you, faith and freedom, they're among my two favorite words, especially my favorite F words.
Those are my favorite F words. A lot of people don't believe this, but those are my two favorite F words. I actually use faith and freedom more often than my other favorite F words. So I think we have a lot in common here.
You know what, Judge? You have a long track record of being a big supporter of the Second Amendment. You've been involved in the courtroom defending the Second Amendment in the past. I know you're a shooter. At least I've read that you're a shooter. And then I also noticed that your opponent has, and I'll let Ted weigh on this in a second, but David Hogg, who is one of the biggest pro-gun grabbers ever in Wisconsin, stumping for her. Why don't you just tell our listeners what the Second Amendment means to you and your support or your position on those disciplines?
You know, the Second Amendment is not about going out and hunting to get food for your family. It's not why the founders did this. That was a given for them, that you go out and hunt for food for your family. They understood this revolution never would have happened if they hadn't been able to have guns and be able to resist tyranny. That's what this is about. It's about self-defense. It's about keeping your family safe. That's what the Second Amendment is. It's not about, I mean, to all due respect to all the Hunter Nation folks, that's not what the Second Amendment's about. It's about things far more serious and far more existential for us.
Bingo.
You know what, Ted? I've heard you say the same thing, Mr. Nugent. And what's your take on the fact that David Hogg is, or how he pronounces his last name, is so interested in Judge Susan Crawford being the next Supreme Court justice up there?
Well, Brad's absolutely correct. And believe me, I get to share Campfire as a very uninhibited, open, and honest communication network. Campfires, literally campfires, figurative and literally, but mostly literally every year since I created Sunrise Safaris. And people come from all around the nation, families, you know, moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and sons and daughters, and just the best people, the salt of the earth, as they say. And we all know that keep means it's mine, you can't have it. And bear means God gave me the right to defend my life, and it's only possible if they're on me at the time, i.e. constitutional carry, which of course we were all born with. My point is that David Hogg, after the Parkland massacre, because it was a gun-free zone, he knows, David Hogg, who's supporting your opponent, knows that gun-free zones are where the most innocent lives are lost every time, because if it says gun-free, there's a document that says shall not be infringed, and that is obviously infringement. So if David Hogg supports somebody, I suspect that David Hogg shares a belief system with that somebody, and that's got to scare families of Wisconsin, because gun-free zones, once again, are the guaranteed slaughter zones where innocent lives are lost most often.
It's a welcome mat to dangerous people. Absolutely. You know, my opponent's doing, this will sound familiar to you. My opponent is running as a moderate. She says, oh, I'm just down the center. I'm not, no need to worry about me. That's how they always run, right? Liberals always run like they're a moderate. As soon as they get in power, they don't remember that promise they made. They are way out left every time. That is what my opponent is. And if you wonder about who she is and what she stands for, look at who's supporting her, like you were just talking about. Other people, you know, Planned Parenthood, the Madison Teachers Association here in Wisconsin, they're all in for boys and girls sports, that organization. We've asked my opponent to denounce that. Say you don't agree with that aspect of what your supporters say. She's not going to say that because she's with them on all this stuff. And it's amazing to me, you know, back on November 5th, America taught the politicians a lesson. The majority of Americans said, enough, stop the madness. We want to go back to a normal nation again, grounded on moral values, grounded on honesty. We want integrity from our elected officials. And unfortunately, the liberals heard none of it. They're still moving forward with the same goofy nonsense that Americans have had enough of.
No, this just turned into a Ted Nugent campfire, because you're speaking the exact language of the people that we hang out with, and certainly are the members of the Hunter Nation movement.
Yeah, and you know, when you talk about David Hogg as indicative of the type of person and people that would endorse Susan Crawford, Pritzker from Illinois is trying to bring Illinois politics over into Wisconsin, which should scare the living hell out of everybody in Wisconsin, because what that guy has led to in Illinois is unspeakable. And then also George Soros allegedly is dumping a bunch of dark money,
$1 million.
Into Wisconsin. So, Ted, when you think about this, the J.B. Pritzkers of the world, the George Soroses of the world, the David Hoggs of the world, the Planned Parenthoods of the world are dumping a ton of money into that Wisconsin race to keep Judge Schimel from reaching the Supreme Court. What does that say to you?
Well, obviously, the things that Pritzker and the backers of your opponent, Judge, represent are pure evil. When you support the slaughter of babies, I mean, with tax dollars, and the Planned Parenthood scam and allowing men in women's locker rooms, they're literally all out for that. We're very concerned that what America stated unambiguously on November 5th is still being eroded and contested in these liberal and I can't believe they use the word progressive, because I've never seen anything more regressive than the agenda of the left. So what Keith is bringing up is the core of quality of life, not just Wisconsin, but across this great country. But once again, the heartland, the Midwest, those values that the Constitution represents. I consider myself a constitutional absolutist, and that the words have iron. Obviously, you've risen to the position where you want to run for Wisconsin Supreme Court because you believe that a Supreme Court should be supremely absolutist about the U.S. Constitution as a foundational guiding light for quality of life. So if you could, Judge, if you were around a campfire right now, because everywhere I go, it turns into a campfire, which, by the way, every place I go, it's no longer a gun-free zone. If I'm there, it's not a gun-free zone anymore. So if you could share with the people who will be witnessing this, and obviously this will go global for eternity, these words and what I stand for, what Keith is proud to stand up for, what you are obviously proud to stand up for, Brett, is going to last forever. So take advantage of this intergalactic campfire to address those families that are looking for a constitutional, conservative. Conservation isn't interesting. All three of those quality of life regimens in my life and Keith's life and the families of Hunter Nation: constitutional, conservatism, and conservation. Those really are the basics of a unique thing called the American dream. How would you address our friends around that campfire regarding the stands that you are willing to take and make judgments on versus your opponent?
You know, the Constitution is not a living, breathing, evolving document. And that doesn't mean it's dead. What it means is it stands for something. It has a permanence. It is the very foundation of everything we do. And it, as you said, it's iron. It doesn't flex. If you want to change something about it, then you need to go through the process of creating an amendment to the Constitution, which there have been good things we did to end slavery in America and many things like that. There were good constitutional amendments, but you have to do it that way. You don't just change it because it's on your whim. I mean, the liberals on the Wisconsin Supreme Court now that have the majority, this is their plan. This is what they're talking about. They've written this already, that the Wisconsin, we need to start viewing this as judges, they say, as different than the United States constitutional jurisprudence. And Wisconsin's constitution should be something that should be evolving. This is dead wrong. If it's evolving, there's no foundation. You're building your house on sand, and it's going to shift as soon as the winds or the waters come. It's going to shift, and you've got nothing to stand on. This, and you know, part of this constitutional principle too is that there's a separation of powers, and this is what liberal activist judges don't follow. They want to legislate from the bench. They don't want to accept what the legislature passed as law. They want to create the law in an image they like, and that's what activists do on the bench. It is incredibly dangerous. They're not capable of making good policy decisions because they aren't the legislature. And instead of having, in Wisconsin, we have 99 people in their state assembly, 33 senators. Instead of those 132 people deciding what the law in Wisconsin should be, we have 4 leftists on the Wisconsin Supreme Court deciding what the law is.
Wow. Scary, really. And, you know, your opponent has said, has promised, in fact, that if she's elected, she's going to gerrymander districts in Wisconsin to flip the scale in favor of 2 districts going to a particular political party. Do you think a judge should make such promises?
I think you should be locked up if you make those kind of promises. If you sell that, and first off, I never thought the New York Times was going to come riding into to help me, but they published the article. They got their hands on the email that went out to national liberal billionaires and told them, come on this Zoom call with Ben Wickler, the Wisconsin Democratic Party chair, and Susan Crawford to talk about how by winning her, getting her on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, we can turn 2 Republican congressional seats into Democrat congressional seats. And the way they do that is by gerrymandering. Our court already did it. When they first got on the bench in 23, when they took the majority, they immediately took a case right up, and within a few months, they destroyed all of the state legislative maps that our legislature put in place, and they replaced them with they got replaced with new maps that help Democrats. They're going to do the same thing with these congressional seats. And my opponent got caught saying the quiet part out loud, and she should be busted for this. But unfortunately, the media in Wisconsin don't want to talk about it. They write quick stories and they move on. I'm talking about it every single day. This is obscene. And like I said, you should be locked up if you are selling that kind of power on the open market for money.
Well, I'm a practicing attorney. And when I heard that and I read that article, I immediately, in my brain, as lawyers think, ethical violations. I don't understand how that is not an ethical violation as a judge or as an attorney to promise something quid pro quo, if you will, in return for money, in return for votes. I mean, I think that opens up a whole can of worms. But think about this, Ted and Judge. She said the quiet part out loud when it comes to redistricting. But if she's willing to legislate from the bench, doesn't that mean election integrity? Unlimited mail-in voting, drop boxes, that could all get decided at the Supreme Court. As hunters, even if we get the wolf delisted with the Pet and Livestock Protection Act that the great Tom Tiffany has, that Hunter Nation is supporting, ultimately, if they want to legislate from the bench at the Supreme Court level, hunters will never kill a wolf in Wisconsin, which could potentially devastate hunting. And what about this, Ted? If they take the advice of David Hogg and they want to legislate the Second Amendment away because the Wisconsin Constitution is a living, breathing thing, next thing you know, they're going to take guns away. I mean, Ted, how critical is it that people that believe like we believe get off their couches and tree stands and get out and vote in this election?
Well, as a practicing attorney, I respect both of you, but I'm a practicing utilitarian pragmatist. And I have seen that certain things work in life, and the engineered recidivism that we're dealing with is a direct result of the left, the Democrats, the Marxists, the anti-Americans, the anti-progressives, is what they really are, have literally cultivated a system by which they've created sanctuaries for the most dangerous, violent criminals, invaders into our country, constantly letting dangerous, violent criminals out to repeat their offenses. And it's analogous to the wolf situation. People who want the wolf protected don't have any wolves in their neighborhood. And people who want to keep letting out rapists and carjackers and assaulters and home invaders out, they can afford private security. So it's them versus us. And I know Wisconsin isn't downtown Madison. Wisconsin is working hard, playing hard, all American work ethic. Buffalo's facing the storm. People in Wisconsin, they enjoy storms, whether it's real or figurative. And these people are looking for a constitutional absolutist. They're looking forward to having represented in someone able, willing, and ready to make judgment calls based on the self-evident truth that we, the people, have to live by. So, Judge, we are spreading the word here. We have a lot of people following us here, and it's going to go on forever. I have a Real America Voice Spirit Campfire and our Spirit of the Wild TV show on the Pursuit Network, even though it's about hunting, fishing, trapping, conservation, resource stewardship, and being the best that you can be. I always weave in this wild thing called politics, because politics in America are we the people studying the history of how our founding fathers were divinely intervened by God to get away from the slavery of King George and tyrants and emperors and Führers. So we once again salute you, because it's a rugged course in the great state of Wisconsin, like my beloved birth state of Michigan has just gone the way of the cuckoo's nest. It's so heartbreaking. So what you're representing here today is a fight. You're a fighter against the trend, the suicidal, culturally, spiritually suicidal trend of the left, creating all these dangerous conditions. And we don't even have to ask, well, why would they do that? I don't care why a person breaks into my house. I know what I've got to do to protect my family. So once again, you represent an instinct, a pure, natural, good over evil, self-evident truth instinct that really is the heartbeat and the pulse of, again, I reference Wisconsin because you're running for the Wisconsin Supreme Court, but this is the pulse that makes America great from coast to coast, from sea to shining sea. So once again, let's address this engineered recidivism by, even according to all the research and all the studies, that upwards of 98%. If I was 98% likely to get a deer hunting, I'd be eating venison right now, which, by the way, I am. But 98% of violent crime is unleashed onto our society by a failed court system that lets that rapist out. They put a child molester on the street as long as he's registered, when they know it's 100% recidivistic. How would you address that scourge of engineered recidivism, where victims are piled sky high because of a leftist court system across this country and in Wisconsin that keeps letting dangerous people out?
You know, there are most people in the criminal justice system have a substance abuse disorder, a mental health problem.
Yeah.
We should absolutely be working to help them to find healing, to change their behaviors, to be successful again, because many of them have children that we don't want to have to raise as a society, or have those kids damaged by not having their parents with them. We should work hard on those things. But dangerous offenders, you can't blink. You have to lock them up and separate them from society, and for a long enough time that they can no longer be dangerous to us. There's a line that you can cross with anything in life. And when it comes to crime, there's a line you cross where we can no longer say, well, okay, it's about your disease or your problem. If you committed violent offenses, if you've offended against little children, you need to get locked up. And you know, there's so many things that you just talked about that I want to try to unwrap a little bit. You know, you talked about the good and evil battle, and you talked about Wisconsin and Michigan. We're surrounded by Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois. Illinois has been a mess for a long time. Minnesota and Michigan have recently decided to make a mess of their states. Iowa is strong. Thank God we touch a little bit of them. We got somebody's hand to hold through all this. But as I've campaigned in all 72 counties of this state, people everywhere tell me they think this is a battle between good and evil. And I agree with them. Back prior to November, I asked people, do you remember how you felt on November 4th? And they start saying words like scared, terrified, anxious, nervous. And I go, why? Why were you so upset on November 4th? Because the stakes were so high. They knew America had stepped up to the edge of the abyss. And unfortunately, darn near half of this country was ready to jump in. They got fooled somehow. And thanks to patriots across America, we got a reprieve. We got to step back from the edge of that abyss. But the job's not done. We have got to stay vigilant. This is our obligation and our responsibility as members of a free nation, to inform ourselves and to get out there and get out in the streets. You know, I talk at a lot of churches now, and not during the services necessarily, but I talk to the people there, and I say, you know what? God absolutely wants you in the pews, but he wants you in the streets. He wants you in the community. You have to get out. It's God's plan, unquestionably, but God needs us to help implement his plan. He needs people of courage and faith and patriotism to go do this. And I've never worked harder on anything in my life. I've run for statewide office before and won as Attorney General in Wisconsin, but I've never worked nearly this hard because I've never seen the stakes this high. This is for all or nothing. We have to win this. And frankly, for Wisconsin, America's part of a movement now that is going to make us better, stronger, safer, healthier, all these things. It's going to bypass Wisconsin if we have a liberal Supreme Court that is going to block everything. I mean, there have been over 70 lawsuits filed against the Trump administration to stop everything he's trying to do. This is lawfare. And if our voters out there on our side, the conservatives, if you want to end this lawfare and be part of this movement in America and be successful along with the rest of the country, then we better end this lawfare by taking back the court.
Bingo. You know, Judge, you've raised so many great points there. And Ted and I actually were on the phone for about an hour this morning, just talking about the country in general, very upbeat about all that's going on with Doge and with the Trump agenda right off. And you know, obviously Wisconsin voted for Donald Trump and that agenda. But in some levels, this Supreme Court race in Wisconsin is almost bigger than the president's election, because what's going to happen in the Wisconsin Supreme Court is going to shape your state for a whole generation at this point.
Yep.
We mentioned
So,
it earlier, guns,
yeah.
the voter integrity, hunting
Yep.
rights. I mean, this is all on the ballot that could be lost for a generation. What would you say to those people that historically don't vote in off elections like this? How important is it? And what would you say to them when they show up? Why you? Why is it so important that they vote for you?
Yeah. I got a couple messages for them. First off, the job's not done. Just finished talking about that a little bit. We've got to end the lawfare. We've got to end courts from taking over the roles of other branches of government and blocking our prosperity, blocking our thriving with that. But I ask people this question, if you voted on November 5th, did it take very much time? And the answer is generally no, it was pretty quick. Did anything bad happen? Did any SWAT team come and kick in your door the next morning because you voted? And the answer is no, it was painless. How did you feel on the morning of November 6th? You woke up and you saw you were part of a movement that saved our nation, that stopped us from jumping into that abyss. You can do that again on April 2nd. It's going to take even less time because there'll be fewer voters. Wisconsin had 3.4 million people vote for November 5th. If we get 2 million on April 1st, that's going to be huge. I think that might be a record. So all those voters that are going to fall off, we need to get them out and come and vote. Whoever turns their base out best wins this. And I'm working to turn the conservative base out and suggest to them, you can have that great feeling again the morning of April 2nd. If you come in and vote in this race and you save our state from its self-destruction, and this is all self-imposed. If we don't get out and vote, we bypass the chance to prevent our own self-destruction. And it's going to be generational. Like you said, Keith, Supreme Court justices are elected for a 10-year term. It's the longest term in Wisconsin government, and it's very hard to ever get them out of office. And once they start making these bad decisions, it's hard to undo it. The only way to do this is win the majority. And if we don't win this April 1st, our next chance to take back the Wisconsin Supreme Court is not till 2028. They've got 2 years in already. They will have had 5 years to kick our teeth in repeatedly. This is self-imposed self-destruction if we don't get out and stop this. We have no one to blame but ourselves.
I've got to emphasize the life and death decision, the simple decision an American can make, a Wisconsin sporter, a Wisconsin conservationist, landowner, a freedom lover in Wisconsin. When you don't vote, you're not neutral. You're literally a welcome mat for people who will vote against you. And it's been proven over and over again. Keith came up with this brilliant idea of Hunter Nation because we share a lot of campfires with the salt of the earth hunting families. And we know that they believe in God, family, country, individual freedoms, the Constitution, certainly private property rights and tax accountability. Maybe we'll get that someday. It looks like we're on our way. But my point being is that we have galvanized an army. We have circled the wagons for the first time of licensed hunting families, down to earth, grounded families who hadn't voted in the past. And we've inspired and scolded and begged and cajoled many of them to do so. But Wisconsin and anybody on this call right now on this technology, spread that word. At church, at school, at the workplace, at the bowling alley, at the barbecue, at the shooting range, when you're ice fishing. If you know a Wisconsin family that doesn't vote, you've got to fix them. This literally is life and death, what Brad is putting forth here and what Keith and I are emphasizing. If we can't continue this true North compass setting revival that we did with Donald Trump on November 5th. And again, it's so simple. Secure borders are good. Open borders are bad. Men competing against women is bad. Men only competing against men is good. I mean, it's so being accountable for our hard-earned tax dollars, going for moral considerations, meaningful, accountable, effective considerations. So everybody right now, I hope you're listening to Brad because he came on here to answer these questions and to confront these issues that literally determine the American dream. Safe neighborhoods, accountability, work ethic, people in the asset column, which once again, that's the Hunter Nation membership. We've
Yeah.
got them to realize that if they don't vote, the enemy considers them an ally. So if you're in the asset column for your family, your community, your state of Wisconsin and America, if you're in the asset column, you need to convince everyone in your life to get out there and vote, because if we don't get a conservative, constitutional, conservationist, freedom supporter on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, Wisconsin will go the hell zone of Michigan, California, Illinois, New York, Jersey. So this is a very important call. Keith, your vision was right on the money. The fruition of getting conservatives to actually perform their we the people responsibility and vote their conscience, it is the deciding factor. So I can't thank you enough, Brad. Even if you like stupid music like Eminem or something, I would still support you. But see, here's the dichotomy. If you believe in the values that make a rugged individual and a hellraiser like Ted Nugent, you gotta love the best music. So that's kind of a far-fetched consideration there. So, so I hope everybody listening realizes our number one job as an American is to vote constitutional, conservative, conservation. Vote. If you don't vote, you are the enemy of freedom.
If any of us had been told 10 years ago, I mean anybody listening too, that we'd have to have a discussion where you pointed out, Ted, that boys belong in boys' sports and not in girls' sports. Borders should be secure, not wide open. 10 years ago, none of it, we said, what are you talking about that for? We don't need to worry about those things. Let's talk about real issues. And here we are. Stuff that was a conspiracy theory or sounded nutty 10 years ago is now the reality we're walking around in. I didn't want to forget this point about the wolf population. Most Wisconsinites, at least in the southern part of the state where I am, they have no idea what's going on. Everywhere I've gone, and not just the Northwoods, but as far as south central Wisconsin, this wolf population is down there. People are scared to let their dogs out at night. They're seeing this, and they're going after livestock and everything else. They've reached down into 3/4 of our state. It is a dangerous thing, and one of these days, a child or something else is going to get taken out when these wolves can't find anything else. This is inexcusable that no one's doing anything about it. And you're right. My opponent, when she was chief legal counsel for Governor Jim Doyle and was the legal counsel for his DNR, she stood in the way of doing anything about this.
Not only stood in the way, Judge,
Yeah.
she advocated for policy that's led to a 300% increase in wolf depredations of livestock, unprecedented number of pet killings. I mean, the lowest deer hunting harvest in recorded history. That's what her policy not only stood in the way of good conservation, her policies have led to this. And if for no other reason alone, if I was a hunter in the state of Wisconsin myself, Keith Mark personally, I know how I would vote. Because if this election goes the wrong way, Judge, it may be the end of hunting forever in Wisconsin. I truly believe that.
I believe it too. Absolutely. The wolf, the people who want to protect the wolf don't have to live with them. And we love the wolf. He's a majestic creature that should be in the asset column. He must be managed. The wolf must be managed.
Yep.
We have more deer, more turkey, more black bears, more cougar than ever because they're big game animals that are hunted based on sustained yield, the carrying capacity, and safety when it comes to predators like the wolf. So, Judge, we salute you for bringing that up because the hunting heritage, the revenues, the billions of dollars in revenues that hunting, fishing, trapping, the outdoor lifestyle represents in Wisconsin, the untold family hours of recreation, we use the term cleanses the soul. Without hands-on conservation, being able to kill your own food and manage your own wildlife, once again, for optimal thriving conditions, we want the wolf to be in optimal numbers. Right now, the wolf is in the liability column because they're intentionally mismanaged based on some city dweller who thinks that it's a cartoon and that everything will be peachy keen because there's no wolves in their apartment. It's really unbelievable. So I hope our Wisconsin sporting families and the conservationists of Wisconsin stand up to the Wisconsin DNR and the movement to eliminate deer hunters and let the wolves kill the deer, and then we'll continue to have to pay the ranchers and farmers. for livestock destruction and other kinds of danger. So once again, we want the wolf to be in the asset column, like bears and deer and turkey.
Well, listen, enough of this politics, because I got to tell you a personal story. I have a good friend lives in Wisconsin, and I told him Ted and I were going to do this call, and he said, "Do you know Judge Schimel?" I said, "No, I've never met him. Obviously, I just met him like you did, Ted, on this call right here." And the guy goes, "He's cool." I go, "What do you mean he's cool?" He goes, "No, listen, the dude is cool, just like this." He said he loves music, and not only does he love music, he's a big Ted Nugent fan. So the judge is going to have a great time on with Ted. But he plays music. And so I personally thought, listen, I see some guitars and a bass guitar behind him. I thought maybe Ted, because we do have a music critic here with us, you, not me, I know what the people were thinking. But how about you grab one of those guitars, Judge, and show us what can you do? And Ted, I know you're in Schimel studio. If you want to,
you got your guitar, Ted?
I'll tell you, I'll grab an acoustic guitar because I can pound out some pre-rut sensual stimuli on an acoustic guitar that I've never heard before.
We'll talk for a second while you go.
Yeah, while the judge is getting his guitar ready, I do want to point out to everybody listening, if you're not a member of Hunter Nation, go to hunternation.org and become a member. hunternation.org. We need you, especially if you're up in Wisconsin. We're building a grassroots army up there right now that's going to go door to door and try to get other people to engage in this upcoming election and future elections. Chris Vaughn is our great state director in Wisconsin. Chris Vaughn. So go to hunternation.org and join today. Now, let's get the judge on here and see what he's got, his weapon of choice.
Yeah, Keith, I want to tell your listeners too. I've been riding Harley Davidsons for 30 years. I've had pickup trucks since I was 16 years old. I love the outdoors. I love shooting sports, and I love rock and roll. I'm a garage band guy, but I love it.
Let's see by the way, when you say you ride a Harley and you shoot and you're pro hunting and love music, that, Ted, is why my buddy said the judge is cool. All right, let's see what you got with that bass you got there, Judge.
All right. Well, I was thinking about a good Ted Nugent song we could rip out. I was hoping he had an electric guitar, but how about this one of my favorites, a little boogie woogie Ted Nugent song.
Hey, baby.
That's a classic. That's a St. Holmes Downriver Motown classic. Hey, baby.
Jump in anytime, Ted.
I would join in, but I'm tuned a half step down.
Oh.
That's got a good groove. James Jamerson and Bob Babbitt of the Motown Funk Brothers would be proud of you, Brad.
Well, what about let's see. You got what? Baby, please don't go. You recorded that once. If you're a half step down,
that's right.
No kidding. Yeah.
All about the right hand, baby. Got to get that right hand flagging.
What about what about Ted? I think he knows how to play my favorite hunting anthem of all time.
Oh.
Well, once again, Brad, I'm 2.5 steps down. So when
I can adjust that. Yeah. So you do it in A normally.
There I was, back in the wild again. I felt right at home, where I belong. I had that feeling coming over me again. Just like it happened so many times before. So many times. Brad, the Fred Bear song, since it came flowing out of my system after Fred died back in 1988, was spontaneously captured by my amazing band, Michael Lutz on bass and Gunnar Ross on drums, where we went in And I literally cried my eyes out during the entire session. But take one after I showed the guys how the song went. And it happened right now. That song has been the #1 requested song in Wisconsin for 36 years now.
I know.
Absolutely. I'm very proud. Thank you, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
How cool that is. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to the judge playing the bass line and you're just going to town, Ted. I think if, and I don't know, Judge, if there's such a thing as an inauguration celebration for a Supreme Court judge.
Yeah.
But I believe if that happens, we have to get Mr. Nugent you on a real stage that night. And
having a party.
Brad Schimel get to come see a live event. We'll have to talk about that.
Oh man, what I would do and what my band would do to get you on the stage with us to play a song that would be off the hook. I mean, this. I didn't really talk. I didn't be all gushy here and everything, but like I said, my buddies and I all drove around with Ted Nugent playing out of our truck windows, and we went to the concerts. We had the time of our lives at those, and man, this is amazing to be on here talking with you and to just hack through a few notes with you. It's that's like a bucket list thing. It's awesome.
Oh, Brad, you know, when my music comes on the radio, your truck goes faster. I've had the only music that causes that to happen. Plus, everybody listens to Fred Bear on opening morning of the deer season, bow season and the gun season. So once again, thank you, Wisconsin, for making that song so powerful. But one of these days, I hope we get to share a campfire, Brad, and we will unleash the Fred Bear song. I do it every weekend, August, September, October, and November on our Sunrise Safaris hunts. And I'll tell you, around a campfire playing the Fred Bear song, it's out of body. Nobody's feet touch the ground. Very, very special.
I've got an acoustic bass too. So if that's happening, absolutely.
Well, listen, the way I'd like to close is, Judge, I'd like to give you a final word to reach our voters. And as we do every time Ted and I are together, we always like to have Ted have the final word. So what's the last thing you would like to leave Wisconsin voters with and why they need to go pull the lever for you?
I cannot understate how important this is. This court is going through a political agenda. And when you go to a ball game, you buy your first $17 beer and you're waiting for the game to start, but the umpire comes out wearing the opposing team's jersey. You're not going to buy a second expensive beer. But that Cardinals fan, maybe that's whose jersey they're wearing. They're pumping their fist because this is great. They're going to get a win. But the problem is baseball's now dead. That Cardinals fan's going to like it for about 10 minutes because baseball's no longer about the athletes on the field. We have justices on our Supreme Court that are wearing a jersey for a team. And this isn't like baseball, where if it's dead, you can find another sport. When the court system dies because it's no longer objective, it no longer has integrity or humility for the limits on its power, then our justice system is dead. And then one of the three legs of our government is gone, and this collapses. We lose our republic. I can't overstate how important this is to restore our court back to objective and fair and unbiased. That's what I'm promising to people. I need your vote to make this happen. Thank you.
Ted, listen, Judge Schimel came on. He was extremely honest with some tough questions, very transparent with where he stands. Judge Susan Crawford, she gave us the cyber middle finger. So what does that say about her, for starters, and what's your take on Judge Schimel, Ted?
Well, once again, I know Wisconsin. I mean, I've got great friends. I use the term blood brothers. I have some great families up in Wisconsin that we rock and roll with. They come and hunt Michigan with me every year. And I've been hunting and rock and rolling and sharing a real spiritual connection with the great people of Wisconsin for many, many years. The Amboy Dukes played gigs up there starting in 1965. The original Amboy Dukes, a little before your time, Judge. But number one, Judge, thanks for coming on.
I was alive.
Were you alive
then?
So bottom line is, this is an opportunity to keep this true north compass alive in the great state of Wisconsin. I hope everybody that's listening today realizes that the choice is clear. And you're right, Judge, your opponent claims to be a moderate. That's a lie. That's none of the things she stands for, or believes in, or supports has anything to do with moderate or down the middle. She is on a crash course leftist agenda. She would be the Kamala Harris of Wisconsin. And I got to beg and pray and and hope and cajole and beseech and scold my fellow spirit of the wild blood brothers in the great state of Wisconsin to spread that word. Now, local politics are the most important of all, and America united, even in those battleground states, for the first time, they elected a guy that's going to secure our country, secure the borders, make a strong military, make sure it's made up of warriors. Boy, we could go into that. That men should not compete against women's sports and get to beat them up in the Olympic arena. So, Judge, thank you for coming on. We believe that you represent the core belief of God, family, country, law, and order of the quality of life that is unique to America and Wisconsin. And we hope that the Wisconsin families show up and do their job, their American, we the people responsibility to vote those core values that differentiate a quality society from a chaos society. So thank you very much for making that stand. And Keith, as always, you get the right people to get on here. We offer the invitation to both sides every time, and it's quite telling who shows up and who doesn't.
I agree. HunterNation.org, ladies and gentlemen.
You guys.
Judge, thank you for joining us, Hunter Nation. I myself personally, like Ted, was very impressed. I know where I'd be voting if I was in Wisconsin, and I'm sure my hunting friends up there know as well. Judge, thanks for joining us. Ted, as always,
thank you,
my
guys.
friend, thanks for everything.
Godspeed. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.